it wasn't that, but it's,
yeah, about halfway through.
yeah.
Boy, it's hot.
Now, it's clear that at the same time, when you spend on average every year $1.2 billion, that's what we spend for our operations, and you have 300 million unexpectedly withdrawn from your income, that presents you with a very big challenge for that particular year and then the following couple of years. So we'll see how we emerge from this crisis. The first part of the year was, I think, positive, but it is on the razor's edge, and for a humanitarian organization that doesn't generate its own income, relies on the voluntary contributions of member states of the United Nations, that makes an additionally very uncomfortable environment. But at the heart of it, as I said, we deal with human beings, and so we're not going to give up. We take our mandate very seriously. We accept that there can be criticism and challenges coming our way, but we'll stay very focused on the mission. $1 billion annually, so of course,
that's not
comparison to the rest. That's, so the only thing that I can say about this is that we have not to date received any final word from the United States about what led to the decision to cut the funding, because we had just in December signed a new cooperation agreement in which all the parameters that are normally discussed between a donor and a partner were discussed and agreed to, and we were convinced that we would be moving forward on, let's say, at least a comparable basis to what we had known in the past. In that sense, I can say with, I think, a great degree of confidence that the decision was not related to UNRWA's performance, because in November I had received very, I think, constructive and openly positive feedback on those issues. I think thereafter what happened was a discussion in New York about the issue of Jerusalem and the status of Jerusalem and the decision by the US administration and the reactions that that created. And I think UNRWA's funding got caught up in what became a very polarizing and politicized environment.
It's every 3 years. Is it up for renewal this year?
No, it's next year.
Okay.
It's next year.
UNRWA was not mandated to advocate for the right of return. That's not our role. It's a political dimension that is at the heart of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now, we also don't need to advocate in that sense because it's enshrined in international law. But let me just draw attention to one fact. It's really important to remember that when I worked in Bosnia, for example, during the war, the entire international community advocated for the right of return of Bosnian Muslims to the neighborhoods that they had been driven from as part of the conflict dynamics there. And when I go to international conferences, I hear the same on the Rohingya and the right of return to, of course, Myanmar. So I just want to put it into the context because it's sometimes presented as being this unique case in international law that it is. I think the heart of the matter is again political. Resolving the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is the fundamental parameter that needs to be looked into. And that is what would provide a way forward, including for refugees. Again, I say, one cannot simply wish the 5 million people away.
So through Greenblatt?
Yes, we've kept the channels open, but there hasn't been, as I said, the only thing.
The education system, the healthcare system, these are all very important priorities. And I have to tell you that when I go to places like Syria, and I was in some of the camps again in July, for example, or every time I visit Gaza, and I see the courage displayed by our students in face of so much adversity, all the lack of horizon in personal and political terms, the uncertainty about their futures, and yet they're absolutely determined to go to study and to develop skills and capacities. I really find it very difficult to imagine that I have to go back to them and tell them that I have failed and we have failed to mobilize the needed resources to keep the one thing that gives them a certain prospect in life operating and ongoing, which is their education. So we will knock on every door. We will leave no stone unturned until we have good news on this front. And the challenge is, if a donor comes and sits down with me and says, look, we think the quality of your... If I set aside now the very challenging impact of the US decision this year, we have diversified our donor base. We have increased, we have had the first multi-year agreements with countries like the Russian Federation. We've had very significant contributions from Gulf countries. We've had India increase its contribution very significantly, as has China. So there are dynamics there, and there are also dynamics in the World Bank and the Islamic Development Bank to provide more stability for the long term. So what is now important is to, in a way, financially survive this year, and then we'll try and tackle the medium-term implications at least.